Chapter 1. The Early Years. Section 1.1. The Birth of a Leader. George Washington was born on February 22, 1732, in the British colony of Virginia, into a modest yet prominent family. His father, Augustine Washington, was a successful landowner, and his mother, Mary Montague, came from a respected family. From a young age, George exhibited a sense of responsibility and an unwavering moral compass. Growing up on the Pope's Creek estate, George's early education was informal, but he had an innate curiosity and a passion for learning. His father passed away when George was just 11, leaving him with a sense of duty beyond his years. His upbringing instilled in him a sense of honor, discipline, and the importance of land and family. Section 1.2. A Soldier's Calling. At age 16, Washington's education led him to the field of surveying. He worked with a land surveyor to map large portions of Virginia. This gave him invaluable knowledge of the American frontier, a skill that would prove essential in later life. At 20, George was appointed as a major in the Virginia militia during the French and Indian War. 1764-1763. His experiences in battle shaped his views on leadership and the complexities of war. During this time, Washington was both an officer and a soldier, learning the art of war from the ground up. Though the war was a formative experience, it also left Washington with deep scars, both physically and emotionally, as he narrowly escaped death multiple times. Section 1.3. The Return to Virginia. After the French and Indian War, George Washington returned to Virginia, where he married Martha Custis, a wealthy widow, in 1759. Their union brought Washington great wealth and land, making him one of the richest men in Virginia. However, he remained a servant to the ideals of liberty and was determined not to let his wealth and status distract him from his country's greater needs. As a landowner and public servant, Washington became involved in the political landscape of Virginia. He was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses, where he began to speak out against British policies that taxed the colonies. He was becoming increasingly aware of the growing discontent with British rule and the rights of the American colonists. Section 1.4. A Foretelling of Change. By the 1760s, tensions between the American colonies and Britain were mounting. Washington was not initially an outspoken critic of the Crown, but events such as the Stamp Act and the York-Townshend actually began to anger him. Though still loyal to the British Crown, he recognized the need for unity among the colonies. Washington's first serious foray into politics came when he spoke at a meeting of Virginia's colonial leaders in 1769. He began to advocate for a unified response to British policies. His reputation as a rising leader among the colonies started to take root, setting the stage for the leadership role he would soon assume. Chapter 2. The Revolutionary Spark. Section 2.1. The Outbreak of War. As the years went by, colonial resentment of British policies continued to rise. In 1702, after the British closed the port of Boston in retaliation for the Boston Tea Party, Washington was deeply moved by the colonial response. The colonies had united in their defiance of Britain, and Washington recognized that this could lead to a revolution. When the First Continental Congress was convened in 1774, Washington was selected as a delegate from Virginia. It was here that Washington realized the full scale of the colonial rebellion and the necessity of armed resistance. The war had already begun, and soon, Washington would be called to serve his country in a way he never expected. Section 2.2. The Commander-in-Chief. In 1775, after the battles of Lexington and Concord, the Continental Congress formed the Continental Army to fight against Britain. They appointed George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Army, a choice that both honored him and placed a tremendous burden on his shoulders. Washington accepted the responsibility with determination, though he knew the road ahead would be perilous. Washington immediately set to work organizing the army. His leadership skills were put to the test as he faced untrained soldiers, limited resources, and a powerful enemy. The early years of the Revolution were tough, with setbacks like the loss of the New York City and the retreat across New Jersey. Yet through it all, Washington's leadership remained unshakable. Section 2.3. The Battle of Trenton. The year 1776 was a turning point for Washington and the Revolution. After a series of defeats, Washington led his troops across the Delaware River on Christmas night, launching a surprise attack on the Hessians renoued at Trenton, New Jersey. The victory was a much-needed morale boost for the American cause, showing that Washington's leadership could turn the tide even in the face of overwhelming odds. This victory was crucial not just for its military significance, but for its political impact. It reignited hope in the American cause and proved to Washington's soldiers that their struggle was not in vain. The win at Trenton led to further successes in the coming year, including the Battle of Princeton, solidifying Washington's reputation as a skilled and determined leader. Section 2.4, The Winter at Valley Forge. The winter of 1777-1778 at Valley Forge tested Washington's leadership and resolve. The Continental Army endured one of the harshest winters in American history. Food was scarce, clothing was inadequate, and morale was at an all-time low. But Washington remained with his troops, leading by example. His presence during these hard times proved that leadership was not just about victory. It was about enduring hardship and persevering for a greater cause. During this time, Washington sought the help of foreign allies, including
Chapter 3, The Turning Point. Section 3.1, The Alliance with France. As the war raged on, Washington's leadership became increasingly pivotal. The turning point came in 1777, when Washington secured the French alliance after the American victory at Saratoga. This was a crucial moment in the Revolution, as France formally recognized the United States and provided military and financial support. Washington's diplomatic skills were instrumental in cultivating this alliance. His ability to build relationships and work with foreign governments helped secure vital resources for the war effort, including troops, weapons, and funds. The involvement of France tipped the balance in favor of the Americans, and Washington's strategy of wearing down the British became more effective. Section 3.2, The Battle of Monmouth. In 1778, Washington's forces faced the British in the Battle of Monmouth in New Jersey. The battle ended in a stalemate, but it marked a major shift in the war. Washington's army was now able to hold its own against the British. Thanks in part to the training at Valley Forge, the battle proved that the Continental Army was no longer just a group of untrained rebels, but a legitimate military force capable of challenging the might of the British Empire. Despite the challenges of the battlefield, Washington's leadership remained resolute. His strategic thinking and ability to inspire his troops played a significant role in keeping the army focused on the ultimate goal: independence from British rule. Section 3.3, The Siege of Yorktown. By 1781, the war had reached a critical stage. The British, led by General Cornwallis, had fortified themselves in Yorktown, Virginia. Washington, along with his French allies, laid siege to the British position, cutting off their escape routes and trapping them on the peninsula. The Siege of Yorktown became the final major military action of the war. Washington's leadership during the siege was exemplary. He coordinated efforts with French forces, ensuring that the Americans and their allies worked in unison. The British surrendered on October 19, 1781, effectively ending the Revolutionary War and securing American independence. Section 3.4, The Treaty of Paris. After the victory at Yorktown, Washington's focus shifted to diplomacy. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783, officially ended the war and recognized the United States as an independent nation. Washington's leadership had brought the country to the brink of its independence, and his wisdom during the peace talks ensured that the new nation would be respected on the world stage. Washington's role in the Revolution earned him the admiration of Americans and the respect of the international community. However, he knew that the challenges of nation-building were just beginning.
Chapter 4, The Birth of a Nation. Crunser Section 4.1, A Call to Serve. After the war, George Washington retired to his estate at Mount Vernon, hoping to return to a life of peace and farming. However, the young nation was in turmoil. The Articles of Confederation had failed to create a strong central government, leading to economic instability and political chaos. In 1787, Washington was called upon to serve once again, this time at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. Washington's presence at the convention was vital. His reputation as a war hero gave him the moral authority needed to unite the delegates. Despite his desire to remain out of the public eye, Washington recognized the urgency of the moment and agreed to preside over the convention. His leadership helped steer the discussions toward the creation of the U.S. Constitution, which would provide the framework for the nation's future. L'Histoire, Section 4.2, the first president. In 1789, the newly formed Electoral College unanimously elected George Washington as the first President of the United States. Washington's election was not just a victory for him personally. It was a triumph for the ideals of democracy and self-governance. Washington took office with a deep understanding of the responsibility he bore, knowing that the future of the nation depended on the decisions made during his presidency. As president, Washington faced numerous challenges, including the establishment of a functioning government, the creation of financial systems, and the struggle to maintain neutrality in foreign affairs. His leadership set many important precedents, such as the creation of the cabinet and the decision to step down after 2 terms, establishing the tradition of presidential limits. For Section 4.3, the Neutrality Proclamation. One of Washington's key contributions during his presidency was the Neutrality Proclamation of 1793. Amid growing tensions between Britain and France, Washington chose to keep the United States out of the conflict, believing that the fledgling nation was not yet ready to engage in foreign wars. This policy of neutrality helped solidify Washington's legacy as a leader focused on the long-term survival of the country. Section 4.4, the Farewell Address. In 1796, after 2 terms in office, Washington announced that he would not seek a 3rd term. In his famous Farewell Address, Washington warned the nation about the dangers of political parties and foreign entanglements. His words would continue to influence American politics for generations.
Chapter 5. The Legacy of George Washington. Section 5.1. A Nation Built on Freedom. George Washington's legacy as the father of the nation is undeniable. Through his leadership in both war and peace, Washington helped shape a new nation grounded in the ideals of liberty, democracy, and self-governance. His wisdom, integrity, and sense of duty set the standard for future presidents and leaders. Section 5.2. The Unseen Leader. Though Washington is often remembered for his public roles, his most enduring qualities were those seen behind the scenes. His commitment to honesty, sacrifice, and the common good shaped not only his leadership but the principles on which America was founded. Section 5.3. Washington's Enduring Influence. Washington passed away on December 14, 1799, at the age of 67. His death marked the end of an era, but his influence continued to guide the nation he helped to create. Statues, memorials, and schools across the nation serve as reminders of his unparalleled contribution to America's freedom and development. Section 5.4. Remembering George Washington. Washington's legacy lives on not only through monuments, but through the spirit of the United States itself. He is remembered not as a perfect leader, but as one who understood the gravity of his role and fulfilled it with honor and courage. Washington's life is a testament to the power of leadership, sacrifice, and the enduring strength of freedom. Chapter 6. Washington's Role in the Formation of the U.S. Government. Section 6.1. The Struggles of a New Nation. After the Revolutionary War, the fledgling United States faced many internal challenges. The Articles of Confederation, the first Constitution of the U.S., were inadequate for managing the country's needs. There was no strong central government to control the economy, regulate trade, or defend the country effectively. The country's leaders knew that the nation's survival depended on the creation of a stronger federal government. During this time, Washington's leadership became even more essential. Although he had retired to Mount Vernon, his name and reputation were pivotal in persuading people to attend the Session Constitutional Convention in 1787, where they would draft a new constitution. Section 6.2. Presiding over the Constitutional Convention. Washington's decision to attend the Constitutional Convention was an important turning point for the U.S. It was clear that the young republic was in a fragile state, and his leadership was needed to bring the states together. As president of the convention, he played a critical role in ensuring the successful drafting of the U.S. Constitution. He remained neutral in the debates, offering advice when needed, but always encouraging compromise. Washington's calm demeanor and unparalleled respect among the delegates helped them navigate through some of the most contentious issues, such as the balance of power between large and small states, and how to structure the executive branch of government. Section 6.3, Establishing Precedents. Washington's first few years as president involved setting precedents that would define the role for future leaders. One of his first actions was to establish the executive departments, including the State Department, Treasury, and yet War Department 8. He selected Thomas Jefferson for State, Alexander Hamilton for Treasury, and Henry Knox for War. This created the Cabinet, a body of advisors who would help him govern. Washington also established the custom of delivering an co-inaugural address, which he used to communicate his vision for the nation. Another important precedent was the two-term limit. Washington voluntarily stepped down after 2 terms, solidifying the idea that no one should hold too much power for too long. Section 6.4, the Bill of Rights. One of the most important steps in solidifying the new Constitution was the Bill of Rights. These 10 amendments, ratified in 1791, guaranteed fundamental rights to all citizens. Washington strongly supported the Bill of Rights, knowing that it would protect the individual freedoms and rights of the people. Despite opposition from some factions, Washington used his position as president to advocate for the Bill of Rights, ensuring that the new government would not repeat the mistakes of the British Crown. Chapter 7. Washington's Foreign Policy Challenges. Section 7.1, the Challenge of Neutrality. One of Washington's most important achievements during his presidency was the establishment of the Neutrality Proclamation. In 1793, the French Revolution had erupted in Europe, and tensions were rising between France and Britain. Washington knew that the United States, still recovering from the Revolutionary War, could not afford to become embroiled in another conflict. The proclamation declared that the United States would not take sides in the war between Britain and France, and that it would avoid any alliances with European powers. Washington's decision to stay neutral helped to keep the young nation out of European entanglements and allowed it to focus on its own development. Section 7.2, the Jay Treaty. Washington's foreign policy was further tested by the Jay Treaty of 1794, which was an agreement with Britain aimed at resolving issues left over from the Revolutionary War. The treaty called for the withdrawal of British troops from American soil and the establishment of better trade relations. However, it was highly controversial, especially among those who favored a stronger alliance with France. Despite the criticism, Washington believed the treaty was essential for preserving peace with Britain and avoiding war. His decision to support the treaty proved his pragmatic approach to foreign relations. Though it was unpopular in some circles, the treaty ultimately helped to stabilize the nation's foreign relations and secured American sovereignty. Section 703, the Pinckney Treaty. In 1795, Washington also negotiated the Pinckney Treaty with Spain, which opened up the Mississippi River for American trade and established a boundary between Spanish Florida and the United States. This was a significant achievement for Washington, as it solidified American access to vital resources and trade routes. The treaty also helped to prevent conflicts with Spain, ensuring the continued expansion of the United States westward. Washington's ability to balance the interests of foreign powers with those of the United States demonstrated his exceptional diplomatic skills. Section 7.4, Relations with Native Americans. Washington's foreign policy also extended to Native American tribes, many of whom were caught in the crossfire of territorial expansion. Washington's administration made efforts to negotiate with Native American tribes through treaties, such as the Treaty of Greenville, 1795, which secured peace in the Ohio Valley. However, the expansion of American settlements led to tensions with Native Americans, and Washington's policies were often criticized for being too favorable to settlers and landowners. Though Washington recognized the importance of preserving peace, the growth of the United States often came at the expense of Native American territories. His legacy in dealing with Native American affairs remains complex. Chapter 8, The Farewell Address and Washington's Retirement. Section 8.1, A Nation in Transition. By 1796, Washington was weary of the demands of the presidency. The weight of leading a young nation, combined with the growing political divisions at home, made it clear to Washington that his time as president had come to an end. His 2 terms in office had set many important precedents, but he felt it was time to step aside and allow new leadership to take the reins. In his farewell address, Washington urged the American people to avoid the dangers of political parties and to steer clear of entangling alliances with foreign powers. He believed that unity at home and neutrality abroad were the best paths to securing America's future. Section 8.2, The Political Divisions. Washington had always been wary of political parties, believing they would divide the nation and lead to factionalism. His warnings in the farewell address about political divisions, particularly between Thomas Jefferson's Democratic Republicans and Alexander Hamilton's Federalists, proved prescient. These divisions would intensify in the years after Washington's retirement, shaping the future of American politics. Although Washington had tried to remain neutral during his presidency, the growing rivalry between Jefferson and Hamilton led to political polarization. Washington's resignation from the presidency marked the end of his involvement in the day-to-day political battles of the nation, but his legacy continued to influence American governance. Verse Section 8.3, Returning to Mount Vernon. After his farewell, Washington returned to Mount Vernon, where he sought peace and solitude. He resumed his duties as a farmer and landowner, but he remained involved in the affairs of the nation. Washington's retirement was marked by reflection on his contributions to the young nation and his hopes for its future. Though he officially retired, Washington's influence was far from over. The political landscape he helped shape would continue to evolve, and his legacy would inspire future leaders to prioritize the nation's unity and independence. Section 8.4, Washington's Last Years. Washington spent his final years at Mount Vernon, overseeing his estate and spending time with family. His health began to decline in late 1799, and on December 14th of that year, George Washington passed away at the age of 67. His death marked the end of an era, but his influence would continue to be felt across the nation. Section 9.1, Washington's Enduring Legacy. Even after his death, George Washington's legacy remained a guiding force in the United States. He was not just the first president, but also a symbol of unity, perseverance, and the principles of liberty. His leadership during the Revolution, his establishment of the U.S. Constitution, and his example of moral character set the foundation for America's future. Monuments to Washington, such as the City Washington Monument, in Washington, D.C., and the continued veneration of his name, are constant reminders of his contributions to the nation's founding. Section 9.2, A Role Model for Future Presidents. Washington's decision to step down after 2 terms set an important precedent for future presidents. His voluntary departure from office ensured that the U.S. would never be ruled by a monarch-like figure. Washington's humility and understanding of the dangers of power shaped the presidency for generations. Future leaders, such as Abraham Lincoln and B. Franklin D. Roosevelt, would look to Washington's example for guidance. Washington's commitment to democracy and his refusal to seek personal power inspired future presidents to lead with honor and integrity. Section 9.3, Washington and the Ideals of the Republic. Washington's presidency was a period of intense nation-building, but it was also a time for reflecting on the ideals of liberty and democracy. His leadership set the tone for America's ongoing commitment to freedom, equality, and justice. Washington firmly believed that the U.S. should be a beacon of hope and democracy for the world, and his vision would continue to inspire leaders for centuries. Section 9.4, Washington's Monumental Influence. Today, Washington is remembered not only as a military hero, but as a statesman who laid the groundwork for the modern United States. His influence can be seen in every aspect of American life, from the structure of the government to the values of freedom and democracy that define the nation. Chapter 10. The Final Words of George Washington. Section 10.1. Washington's Reflection on His Life. As Washington neared the end of his life, He reflected on the choices he had made and the future. He had worked to build for the United States. He had given much to his country, sacrificing time, health, and personal desires for the greater good. In his final moments, Washington was surrounded by family and friends, knowing that his efforts had laid the foundation for a country that would flourish long after his death. Section 10.2, the national mourning. Washington's death was felt deeply throughout the nation. In every state, citizens mourned the loss of their beloved leader. Funeral processions were held, and people across the country paid their respects. Washington's passing was more than the death of a man. It was the end of the first chapter in America's journey toward becoming a great and powerful nation. Section 10.3, the Washington Legacy in Modern America. The legacy of Washington's leadership continues to resonate in today's America. The ideals he championed, democracy, freedom, and unity, remain central to the identity of the nation. Washington's image is woven into the fabric of American culture, and his name is synonymous with leadership, patriotism, and service to the country. Section 10.4, Washington's place in history. George Washington's place in history is secure. He is remembered as the indispensable man who led America through its most formative years. He established the principles and traditions that continue to guide the nation. Washington's contribution to the American experiment remains unparalleled, and his legacy will forever shape the course of history.